We understand the whole process of how children are conceived and how they're formed within the womb. We still don't know who that person is when they're going to come out. We don't know ourselves many times who we are. When we stand and look in a mirror, do we really know what's inside of our own body? Most of the time we really don't. We look in the mirror and who's looking back? You know, for me in the mornings I look and holy smoke, my dad is there. You know, but we don't know. But God does. David says, you knew me before I was even created. So you know every single cell of my body. You know every synapse that's going on in my mind. You know what I'm going to say before I even say it. You were there. In fact, Lord, every single one of the days of my life has been preordained by you. You are in control of everything in my life. All the days of my life are ordained by you. Then he moves into that final segment, and he begins to talk about his enemies and how his enemies, he makes this profession that his enemies are God's enemies. Okay? Whoever is an enemy of God is an enemy of David. This particular statement, the way David makes it, is one that comes from an ancient Hittite treaty in what we call the ancient Near East tradition. Vassals would, because a king has been kind and gracious to them, they would swear allegiance and loyalty to the king by making this type of a statement saying, whoever are your enemies are my enemies. I will stand up for you. I will be loyal to you. I will be obedient to you because you are the one who cares for me. You are the one who guides me with your right hand. Now, O Lord, now that I understand that, now that I really recognize who you are, search me out. Find out whatever is within me that's keeping me from knowing you even better, from knowing what you want for me to do. And then, once you root that out, fill me with your Spirit and guide me in the way of everlasting life. What an awesome prayer he finishes with there. He prays for vindication from his enemies. David's not bashful about that, and I think it's nice to know that it's okay for us to ask God to vindicate us when people are maligning us for our faith. But I think it's even more important to understand the totality of this psalm and how it might really truly apply in our lives. So I was thinking about that, and when I was younger, I had an opportunity to begin working on a pilot's license. And the thought came to me, you know, where can I go? Well, you know, when you fly, you have your instrument panel. The gauge that is absolutely in the center of the instrument panel is called the attitude indicator. Okay, now I would show you that up on the screen here, but it's a little hard for you to see, okay? The attitude indicator is virtually the most important instrument on the entire panel. Because the attitude indicator, or a lot of times people call it the attitude gyro, shows you what the attitude or position of the plane is, yes, when it's on the ground, more importantly, when it's in flight. It tells you if your plane is pitched up or if it's pitched down. It tells you if you're banking. It tells you if you're flying vertically, or if you're flying horizontally, and if you're flying right side up or upside down. Now, that's a very important thing to know when you're flying. Okay, now, on a day like today, yeah, that's a good instrument to have, but it's not completely essential. But what happens when you're up there and you're flying and you run into what my friend Tim Hartney is a pilot with U.S. Air, so I called and talked with him to verify some of this information, make sure I didn't steer you wrong, pardon the pun. And when you fly in weather that's not good, like I had an opportunity to go up with Tim when he was in flight school down in Florida, and it was what he would always refer to as a pretty soupy day. Visibility was only about 2 or 3 miles, so we got up to about 1,500 feet and decided that's probably about as far as we're going to go, and we turned around and came back and landed the plane and called it good. But what happens if you can't just turn around? What happens if you're up there and you're flying around and it's really soupy weather? And it gets to a point where it's so clouded or so foggy that you can't see anymore. It isn't nice and clear like this. How do you reach your destination? At that point, people are taught, and if a person wants to move along in their ratings with their pilot's license, they'll move on from a private license, and then they'll get their instrument flight rating, which means that they've spent hours under what they call the hood, okay? You spend hours in a simulator in which they will put a cover over it, and there's basically nothing that you can see out the window. All you have are instruments. You're given a destination, and you have to fly to that destination, and you have to land the plane at that destination, all by instrument. Okay, now, you can see where this would become very important if everything was so cloudy outside that you couldn't see, and you had to depend solely on the attitude gyro. If you couldn't see the horizon, if you couldn't see to the ends of the sea, okay, as David talked about seeing to infinity, you would have to depend on your attitude indicator. The only problem that can come in is if you have either an electric failure or a loss of vacuum, because that's what that gauge runs off of, is vacuum. If that happens and that gauge dies out on you while you're flying, you are left to depend upon the other instruments that are on the panel. You have a vertical speed indicator. You have a horizontal directional indicator. You have an altimeter to tell you the height that you are flying at. You have another that will tell you your speed. Another one that tells you how much gas you have. Not that you can do much once you're up there. But you have to depend on the other instruments that are there in order to make your way back. Well, you know, that's what God is like for us. God is our attitude indicator. He's our attitude gyro. The attitude gyro on a plane knows exactly what position that plane is in. It knows what its attitude is at all times as long as the vacuum is working. You can try and fool it, but you're not going to be able to do that.